Good Friday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for May the 19th. Today we are reading together in Deuteronomy chapter 12, which is continuing this section here in the last book of the Pentateuch, the closing words, the final address of Moses to the people of Israel before they cross over the Jordan into the promised land and commence the conquest of Canaan. Within this middle section here of Deuteronomy chapters 12 through 26, we have a number of instructions concerning specific laws and statutes and ordinances. This section we're looking at right now, chapters 12 through about 16, is going to focus on things concerning worship and their devotion to God. Some of the details concerning the worship practices that would take place either at the tabernacle or, again, an emphasis within this section is the place where Yahweh would put his name. We're going to see that, I think, show up here at least a couple of times. Maybe not. No, I think it's in the next chapter, actually. I think it's in chapter 14. We're going to see the place where Yahweh puts his name. That's going to show up again. But today's section does still talk about worship and devotion, and it's about three different scenarios in which someone might try to lead you away from being devoted to Yahweh. We're going to talk about that and see the instructions that Moses has for the people within this text. I appreciate so much you taking the time to read along with me on this Friday. Hope that it's going well for you, and I hope that this reading and all the readings that we've had this week have been good for you, that they've been a blessing to you and helped you to grow in your knowledge and faith concerning God. So let's read together here in Deuteronomy chapter 13 and verse number 1. Deuteronomy 13 and verse number 1. If a prophet or someone who has dreams arises among you and proclaims a sign or wonder to you, and that sign or wonder he has performed or he has promised you comes about, but he says, let's follow other gods, which you have not known, and let's worship them. Do not listen to that prophet's words or to that dreamer, for Yahweh your God is testing you to know whether you love Yahweh your God with all of your heart and soul. You must follow Yahweh your God and fear him. You must keep his commands and listen to him. You must worship him and remain faithful to him. That prophet or dreamer must be put to death because he has urged rebellion against Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the place of slavery, to turn you from the way Yahweh your God has commanded you to walk. You must purge the evil from you. If your brother, the son of your mother, or your son or daughter, or the wife you embraced, or your closest friend secretly entices you, saying, let's go and worship other gods, which neither you nor your ancestors have known, any of the gods of the peoples around you, near you or far from you, from one end of the earth to the other, do not yield to him or listen to him. Show him no pity, and do not spare him or shield him. Instead, you must kill him. Your hand is to be the first against him to put him to death, and then the hands of all the people. Stone him to death for trying to turn you away from Yahweh your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the place of slavery. All Israel will hear and be afraid, and they will no longer do anything evil like this among you. If you hear it said about one of your cities, Yahweh your God is giving you to live in, that wicked men have sprung up among you, led the inhabitants of their city astray, and said, let's go and worship other gods which you have not known. You are to inquire, investigate, and interrogate thoroughly. If the report turns out to be true that this detestable act has been done among you, you must strike down the inhabitants of that city with the sword, completely destroy everyone in it, as well as its livestock with the sword. You are to gather all its spoil in the middle of the city square and completely burn the city and all its spoil for Yahweh your God. The city is to remain a mound of ruins forever. It is not to be rebuilt. Nothing set apart for destruction is to remain in your hand, so that Yahweh will turn from his burning anger and grant you mercy, show you compassion, and multiply you as he swore to your ancestors. This will occur if you obey Yahweh your God, keeping all his commands I'm giving you today, doing what is right in the sight of Yahweh your God. And that is Deuteronomy chapter 13. Another emphasis within this section is the reality of worshiping God the way he dictates, the way he prescribes, is going to lead to blessings. And of course, the opposite of that is if you don't, if you either you are one who entices other people to turn from Yahweh and to seek other gods, or if you get caught up in the same type of rebellion within your entire city, and there's going to be really severe consequences. One thing I've noted in each of these three scenarios, proposed scenarios, is the reality that devotion to Yahweh was a literal matter of life and death. If they were devoted to Yahweh, then the language throughout the entirety of the book is that they would receive tremendous blessings. The land would yield its fruit to them. They would have long lives in the land. Their generations would grow, and their descendants would be many. But if they do not, then here within the text we see that death was a very real end for them. I want to note the connection in this chapter to what we've seen previously in chapter 12. At the end of chapter 12, it talks about when you go into the land and you enter to take possession of it, make sure that you are not ensnared by the ways of the nations that were there before you. Do not inquire about their gods, asking, how did these nations worship their gods? I'll do the same. You must not do that, because their acts are detestable. They even kill their children in the name of their gods by making them pass through the fire, by offering them as offerings to these pagan gods. So the danger was not only from those who were outside of Israel, from the nations, that they might influence them, but there's also the reality that there could be danger from the inside of Israel. And those are the three scenarios that we have here. The first one being, if you have a prophet or a dreamer of dreams who rises up to tries to persuade you to go against Yahweh, you need to deal with that. If there is a relative of yours who tries to do the same, you need to deal with that. If you have an entire city within Israel that has gone the way of idolatry and paganism, you need to deal with that as well. So concerning the prophet or someone who has dreams, it's interesting here, the order that it is stated in. So you have someone who proclaims a sign or a wonder to you, and that sign or wonder he has promised you comes about. So if there's someone who says, here is a signifying sign, or that's really redundant, a confirming sign, there we go, a confirming sign that what I'm saying is true, and then they turn around and tell you something that you know you should not do, like seek after other gods, then that's very problematic. And that to us is, I think, as I read that just seemed very backwards to me, because I mean, my brain works in the way of kind of what we see more so in the New Testament, that those who were taking the gospel out would take the gospel and give this truth and then confirm it with a sign. Here it's almost backwards. There's this sign, and then they try to tell you to go against these other gods. Well, it doesn't matter what happens with the sign. You know that what they're saying is wrong, because you are not to seek after other gods. Remember, this should be all read in the through the lenses of the Shema, that Yahweh is our God. Yahweh alone is our God. Yahweh alone is the one God for us, and we should love him with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And that's quoted and referenced numerous times throughout this text in various ways. So even if they can do this thing, then the message they're still giving that was wrong. It makes me think of like the magicians from the Exodus who were able to throw down their rods and turn them into snakes. They were able to replicate some of the water to blood, able to create some frogs. But at the end of the day, the message that they're giving is wrong, because it was to seek after other gods, not Yahweh, and to stand against Yahweh. That's what this reminds me of. Is here you have people who seem on the surface to have some sort of power, but the message, you realize that's not a message that would be coming from God. It's not something that he would want you to do. The emphasis here is especially on the message. But then the scenario is, I don't know, just made even more difficult to understand, in my mind at least, in the fact that we see in verse number 3 that, this could be a test from Yahweh to test your loyalty and to see whether or not that you would follow after him. So maybe it seems almost as if maybe it's Yahweh who is allowing these people to do these works. And the testing of God towards the people is not something that's novel to us either. It's not something that we have not heard before, because we go back to chapter 8 and verses 2 and 3. Many of the difficulties that they faced in the wilderness were tests from Yahweh to see whether or not they were loyal to him, or whether they would grumble and complain as so often they did. But regardless, at the end of the day, whenever there is someone, even this prophet or this dreamer, who tries to get you to follow after other gods, you must not do that. Instead, verse 4, you must follow Yahweh and fear him. You must keep his commands. You must listen to him. You must worship him. Remain faithful to him. No matter what happens, this is what you are to do. For the prophet, well, the prophet needs to be put to death. Again, devotion to Yahweh is a matter of life and death. It is the leaven principle. The leaven must be purged from you. You must purge, the end of verse number 5, the evil from you. So leading someone away from Yahweh, that is a death sentence. Same thing would be true even for individuals, even for your own family members, that if they secretly entice you, let's seek after these other gods. I've heard really good things about them. Let's try that out. Moses says here, again, a number of commands. Do not yield, do not listen, do not show pity, do not spare, do not shield him. Instead, you must kill this person. But here's something very, very interesting. Your hand, so the one who is initiating this, your hand is to be the first against him to put him to death, and then the hands of all the people. So this seems to be a part of this command to maybe help against making just false accusations. If you're going to say this is something that has been said, if you're going to make this claim, then you better be willing to back it up by being the first one to act upon it. That seems to be what's going on here, that if you're going to take this retribution, you need to make sure that this is a substantiated accusation, not you just wanting to get back at somebody, smear their name a little bit. This is very serious. Again, devotion to Yahweh is of the utmost importance. So if this truly happens, you are going to be the first one to raise your hand up against him, and then the whole community will raise up a hand against him as well. They will stone him to death. And again, this is all so that the evil will be purged, so that Israel will hear about it as a whole, and they will be deterred from allowing this evil to be among them. The third of the 3 seditious situations we have here is concerning a citywide rebellion. So in this instance, kind of the underlying principle is you've come into this land and you have expelled the pagan Canaanites out of this land. You've destroyed them. You've kicked them out. If you begin to act like them, then the same punishment that they receive for their paganism, you're going to receive as well. If you hear that one of your cities has wicked men within them, and they have led all the inhabitants to go and to worship other gods, then you need to investigate it thoroughly, not just go upon the first thing that you hear, or not just say, well, I heard a couple people. No, you need to go investigate thoroughly. You need to interrogate the people thoroughly. And if the report turns out to be true, that this detestable act is among them, rebellion and paganism, idolatry was a detestable act, then you need to do what's happened in these 2 previous situations. All those involved, they need to be put to death. Completely destroy everyone in there. The livestock too. Gather everything within the city, put it in the middle, completely burn it all. You are offering this up as spoil to Yahweh. And you know what? Following this place is to never be rebuilt. It is to remain a mound of ruin forever. It is not to be rebuilt. Nothing set apart for destruction is to remain in your hands, and that's so that Yahweh's anger doesn't burn against you, so that he might show you, so that he might show you mercy and compassion and multiply you, just as he swore these promises to your fathers. And verse 18 really seals the deal on all this. It seals the deal concerning the prophet and the dreamer, seals the deal concerning the family member, seals the deal concerning the citywide rebellion. This will occur if you obey Yahweh your God, keeping all of his commands I'm giving you today, doing what is right in the sight of Yahweh your God. Specifically, whenever this is stated, this will occur. You will receive mercy and compassion and multiplying from Yahweh if you deal with these situations in the right way. If someone tries to do the worst of things, which is to cause you to give your devotion to anyone or anything else other than Yahweh, and if you will handle that appropriately, if you will purge that evil from amongst you, then God will be with you and God will bless you. It's a tough chapter. It's a tough chapter whenever you're dealing with something as serious as issues that demand the death penalty. But again, it just shows the seriousness of how much God demands that devotion be given to him. Again, it wasn't these pagan gods. It wasn't the idols that brought them out of Egypt. No, it was Yahweh and Yahweh alone who brought them out. And for that, he is worthy of their absolute devotion. Nothing of themselves could ever be given to anyone else. And those principles certainly remain for us today, that God has brought us out of our own Egypt. He's brought us out of the land of sin and despair and hopelessness. And friends, for that, if he has delivered us through the exodus of Jesus, then he demands our total devotion in the exact same way. May we never, ever, ever, ever seek to follow or seek to devote ourselves to anything other than Yahweh. He is our God. He is our deliverer, and he alone deserves our devotion and honor in every way. I appreciate you tuning in for this reading on this Friday. Hope you have a great rest of your Friday, and we'll be back at it again reading tomorrow from Deuteronomy chapter 14. We're just going to talk about some more forbidden practices concerning shaving of heads and cutting oneself. We're also going to read about some unclean and clean foods, and finally read about the tithing practices, the tenth of everything being given to the Lord. Again, what we have here in this section of Deuteronomy is a rehashing of things that have been previously spoken back in Exodus and Leviticus and some in Numbers too. But remember, these are the final words. So Moses is wanting to re-emphasize these things in the minds of the people, to go back and review this with them, so that whenever they enter the lands, they can live and worship and serve Yahweh as he would have them to serve him. Again, thanks for tuning in today. Hope I'll see you again in the morning as we read together from Deuteronomy chapter 14. Take care and God bless.